Hello everybody, and welcome back to another Minecraft Cold War build tutorial, and today we're going to be doing the Chinese 112 heavy tank. Now the 112 is a vehicle which is, well, like many Chinese projects, shrouded in great secrecy. And that remains true till today. And though this thing was designed in the 1960s, at least according to what Wargaming's info has to offer, though this thing was designed in the 60s, we're going to give Wargaming the benefit of the doubt on this. The Chinese Communist Party has still not yet completely declassified info on this. And even if the 112 is not real, we know for a fact that the WZ-111, which is a heavy tank program which we know existed in China around the same time, maybe a little bit earlier, which was more or less a Chinese make of the IS-3, if you want to say that. Like, it was really just kind of the Chinese way of getting something on the caliber of the IS-3. Because this was that early age of Cold War heavy tanks, when everyone was sort of getting into the idea. We know that the WZ-111 existed, and I think, yeah, no, the WZ-111's chassis still exists with a fake turret, or a test turret, as in, like, it's just a box to simulate the weight of the turret on the top of the hull, on the top of the chassis. That does still exist, though the turret was never finished and whatnot, but we also just don't have a lot of info on projects, even such as that. And there's I think it was the YouTube channel, I think it was Cone of Arc, who, he actually is really reliable, it seems, when it comes to his studies of armored vehicles, always referencing very reliable sources whenever he does his videos on these vehicles, and I believe he did a video on the WZ-111. And in his video, you can tell that even despite all the reliable sources that you can get, there's still just not a lot of info which is released by the Chinese Communist Party for us to go off of. So as far as the WZ-111 is concerned, we'll probably never know the real story behind that program. But that's the 111. This is the 112. This we know even less about. Now, Wargaming here has a section of historical info on the World of Tanks wiki, and I don't like to hold on to what World of Tanks says as gospel, but we're going to take it because it's what we have, and this is where the 112 is known most. Also, this thing is a requested build, hence why this is here. And as you saw when the video began, there's not a lot of solid info I have to give you in the info screens. I don't have a realistic measurement of the vehicle to go off of, so when I built this thing, I built it roughly to scale with everything else that I have. So I had to build this one by eyesight, as opposed to any of my other recent builds which I've been able to do, which I have measurements for. This thing, nothing. This was all by eyesight and referencing the layout of the interior modules and crew layout positions that the World of Tanks model has to offer. Referencing that, using that, and building off of that reference point, I was able to come up with this end product of the 112, and I'm pleased with it. I really am pleased with it, and I think you will be too. It has an interior, really nice interior actually. The exterior turned out beautifully, and like with all of my newer builds, I did take the liberty of putting my own spin on things by adding my own little bits and pieces of detail, mainly just in the ways of exterior cargo and things hanging off the side of the chassis. But I think it looks nice, and obviously if you don't want the cargo, you can always remove it yourself when you're building it. But I decided to add it because some vehicles need just the decoration more than others. So what can I tell you about the 112? Again, like I said, the 112, we don't really have a lot of info. Heck, I myself am skeptical about whether or not it actually existed. But because World of Tanks has a model of it and it's supposed to request a build, I'm not one to say no to, you know, build requests. Unless you're requesting something that is a blatant joke and mainly requesting it for the memes, and it's more so a joke vehicle. Stuff like that I may reject, but in terms of this type of build request, I couldn't turn this down. Plus, I love Chinese vehicles. I do love them. I love them. I love them mainly because they're mysterious. Like, the public opinion of Chinese tank design and tanks as a whole is that, or at least up until, I guess you could get to the modern day, up until then, but pretty much through the Cold War, they were, at least according to public opinion and opinion among the tank enthusiast community, is that it seems that the big belief is that they're just like, they just copied the Soviets, which is not false, because let us remember that China and the Soviet Union were very close, especially in terms of military assets, up until the Sino-Soviet split, when the Chinese Communist Party and its communist values differed from that of the Soviet communist values, and so they ended up going their own way inevitably at some point. And with that, also they also sort of went their own way with military assets as well. So kind of like a little bit of a blood feud, I guess you could say, within the communist world. A little bit of a blood feud. So up until the Sino-Soviet split, for the most part, Chinese military assets were pretty much just imported was made up of pretty much just imported technology from the Soviet Union. And I guess the 112, you can see a lot of inspiration from Soviet design. I mean, you can see that even up till modern day with the ZTZ-99 tanks, MBTs, ZTZ-99A2, or a little bit less so with the newer, like the light tanks that they're coming out with, the VT5 especially. But you can start to see China kind of getting its own style of things. But for the most part, there's this undeniable relation to the Soviets' design. You can see it when you look at the ZTZ-99 and you compare it to things like the T-90. Okay, yeah, they look substantially different to the untrained eye, but when you look at the minor details, when you look at the overall characteristics of the vehicles, objectively they may look very different, but when you take into consideration the objective, the whole object, and you take into consideration its armor, its systems, characteristics like gun depression, the silhouette of the vehicle, its size, its speed, the gun it's using, the type of rounds that it's using. You take those sorts of things into consideration, you really start to see where the lineage comes from, and you really start to see that, yeah, it all did come from the Soviets. But the reason why I think Chinese vehicles interest me even more than Soviet vehicles is because not enough is known about them, and no one talks about them enough either. People hate Chinese vehicles, I think, very unjustly. And I do believe that the people that make jokes about Chinese vehicle design and really don't take the time to understand them, especially even people like the War Thunder community, which bust China and China players for the vehicles in there because it's a copy-paste nation. Well, yes, up until a certain point, it is mostly just imports from the Soviet Union and the USA. But then they start to get in more developed on their own toward the later end of the ground forces tech tree, and even for the air tree for that matter. But the people who bust on China and their vehicles without knowing a thing about them are quite ignorant. And I don't want any of you to be that way. I want you to be... If you're watching my videos, I want you to share my sentiment for vehicles, especially like the Chinese vehicles. I want you to understand how I see things and hear what I have to say, and hopefully my opinion on these sorts of things will, you know, reach you, and maybe you will start to see things more of my way. But Chinese vehicles are so shrouded in mystery, but they're also so interestingly developed. Yeah, they're very related to the Soviets, but they're different. So give these vehicles their opportunity in the spotlight, and give yourself an opportunity to learn about them. Because when you give yourself an opportunity to learn, you know, learning things like these, if you're not someone who overly enjoys learning about the different technicalities of the vehicles, or, you know, their statistics, and maybe you're just more interested in the history of the project, then there are ways to learn about the history of the project, and then you can also kind of piece together how these sorts of things may have came about. So the thing, like something like the 112 here, like I said before, is where you start to see China becoming more independent after the Sino-Soviet split. Or rather, around the time when they were starting to break. I love seeing how history affects affects projects like this, and especially how the really uncanny history between the Soviet Union and China really led to China's will to modernize their military, but in their own indigenous way. I love that. I love seeing militaries do things on their own. Now, me speaking about China this way may be a bit taboo, but this is my opinion. Anyway, I think maybe what I'll do here is I'll read this brief bit of information which Wargaming has on their Wikipedia about the 112, so that you can see what they have to say here, and you can determine for yourself how much you believe it. I myself don't believe a whole lot of what Wargaming has to say about vehicles, and I haven't even read this information myself yet, so I'm going to read this for the first time, and you're going to be hearing it from me. So, here's what it says. After the ties between the Soviet Union and Communist China began to break, China sought to develop a heavy tank which would be capable of fighting the T-10 and IS-3 tanks. This led to the development of several projects, such as the 112, crew placement deviated from the Chinese standards, and was more akin to that of the IS-2 because of the engine's more akin to that of the IS-2. Because of the engine's size, it had to be mounted longitudinally, I think that's how you would say that, as opposed to the standard transversely mounted engines found in other Soviet and Chinese tanks. Ammunition was stored on either side of the driver in the hull, while additional fuel tanks were placed on the floor of the fighting compartment to increase the operational range of the 112 to up to 400 kilometers. A 120mm smoothbore cannon was planned to be the main armament. However, some sources state that a 152mm cannon was also planned, but this is unlikely considering the industrial level of China at the time. The 112 did not enter mass production because China's industrial capabilities could not support it. And that's the end of Wargaming's little section of info there. Aside from those two terms there, which I never really seen before and kind of gave me a little bit of a issue trying to pronounce them. Aside from that, their info does look solid. It does look presentable, but I think I do think it's lacking. I feel like we need more info. And one thing I wish that Wargaming would do is that they would give us more clearly, you know, their sources and where they find these things from and where they find these designs from. Like the 112, did they just pop this idea of what it looks like out of thin air? Because I know that they've done that before with other vehicles. Did they pop this out of thin air? Or did they have a basis to work off of here? This is what I want to know. But Wargaming doesn't give us that, and I really, really wish they did. But such is life. So we have to only imagine for ourselves what this thing actually did look like if World of Tanks' model is not correct. But again, we're going to give World of Tanks the benefit of the doubt. And we're going to accept this as the 112 Chinese heavy tank. This is what we know it as. This is how we've met it as. This is what we're going to know it as. So let's accept this. But as far as the info, again, like I said, it looks presentable. It looks solid. But I really do wish we knew more about these things. And it depresses me sometimes to see vehicles that have such a limited amount of information for us to get our hands on. It depresses me. But especially because this is something from the 1960s, and it's also, again, it's the Chinese Communist Party we're talking about. We're probably not going to get to see any records surface anytime soon, if at all, about these old projects. I would love it if they would declassify a lot of these things. I don't know why you keep things like this from the 60s still classified. I don't know why you keep it classified, because by this point, what does it matter? You're not hiding anything in terms of technology. You're not hiding anything. There's nothing to hide. I really do feel like it would be a smart move, especially for us people in the world of tank enthusiasts, if they would give us this info. But we're probably never going to get it. But all we can do is imagine the reality of the 112 heavy tank and accept what we do know about it at all. But this is why I love Chinese vehicles, because we don't know this. We don't know their true nature, and it remains mysterious. And you can compare that interest of the unknown to things like people who study astrology, or people who study the oceans, and so on and so forth, because these things are largely unknown to us. Well, what is out there in beyond our planet is unknown to us. And even on our own planet, in the oceans, much of it is still left unknown to us. And so that's how you can kind of understand the weird human sentiment of seeking to know the unknown, wanting to understand the unknown things. And, you know, I'm getting kind of deep with this, but what I'm getting at is that this is how I feel about armored vehicles like this, because you don't understand how much I love armored vehicles. I am probably too fanatical about them, but I believe that this is it's just who I am. I just love these things that much. And so that's why I'm getting kind of deep with this topic, but you know, maybe I'm carrying on a bit too long with this. And the tutorial's coming to a close here soon, because as you can see here, we're finishing up the crew compartment in the turret. And after that, the driver's compartment's going to be a pretty quick build. There's not much to have to put into the driver's compartment. So we're going to be cutting in and out of scenes here, and we're about to head into the driver's compartment now. So I'm going to probably start wrapping up my commentary now. Anyway, if you would like to see any builds for yourself, if there's anything you'd like to see me build, feel free to leave a comment in the comments section. I also, in the link, I'm tired. In the description, there are links to my Discord, my Facebook, my Twitter, but no one bothers with those last two. But I would love it if you'd come and join the Discord. I love getting to meet you people in my Discord and getting to talk to you and hang out with my people a little bit. And you can also leave your requests there. So, I think I will wrap up my commentary now. I hope you all enjoyed the builds. Like I said, feel free to leave a comment if you'd like to see something. I hope to see you all again in the future. So, take care, God bless you all, stay safe, and I'll catch you all next time. Goodbye.